Hey everybody, welcome back to another devlog video where I wanted to talk about weapons and how I'm prototyping weapons and implementing weapons and how I'm basically handling that part of the gameplay loop in my project, which I'm calling Deck Knight. It's an action game built from scratch using Unreal Engine 5, where I'm trying to incorporate real-time action gameplay with card building, deck building mechanics, and trying to see how I can blend those mechanics together to kind of make an interesting, fast-paced action game that has roguelike elements and kind of just progressive elements like that. So I want to show you first the dagger weapon. And so the dagger weapon is a pretty straightforward combo. 4-stage combo, one with double hits. That can be repeated over and over again like a basic combo. And then the hold attack lets you kind of charge forward, and you have a little bit of movement control while he's doing this wraparound kind of attack. And so you can basically stagger those together in a way to kind of just keep the pressure onto the enemy and just kind of continually build damage. And on top of that, I have a custom blocking mechanic that doesn't really do anything right now, but what I want this blocking mechanic to do is it will consume some sort of stamina, some sort of resource, and while you have it active, you'll be able to deflect attacks or just deflect projectiles. I'll have to see how I kind of want it to function long term. But with each weapon, I want to have a set of cards that you can activate for that weapon. So special attacks, special abilities, and things like that, so that the player can equip one primary weapon and one secondary weapon. So the secondary weapon will always be either a bow or a staff or something long-range projectile-based, while the primary weapon will be melee-based. And so the primary weapons that I have that I want to work on are the sword, the great sword, or sword and shield, and great sword, dagger, and then maybe something like axe or scythe or something to that effect. And where the ranged one would be a bow or potentially a staff that can shoot projectiles and do interesting things there. And with those melee and long-range abilities, you can also have your basic cards like the fireball that I have here as well. So you can kind of use these in tandem to take on more and more enemies and kill more and more enemies and have a lot more survivability. So I want to kind of break down what I'm doing with these melee weapons, how they work just from scratch, just so you guys have a good idea of what I'm working on. So the stuff starts with the actual weapon itself. So I have a object, let me just close out of this warning, runtime error. And let me make the UI a little bit bigger, just so you guys can see a little bit more about what's going on. So I have this object, it's a weapon-based object, and what this object does is it holds information about the weapon. And so for the weapons, it kind of is maybe too broad of an object because it holds so much information. But in general, it holds information about the weapon skeletal mesh or the weapon static mesh. And if it's a static mesh, I use it as an instance static mesh. And then if it's a skeletal mesh, you have the option for a anim instance property for the actual anim blueprint. Because for my bow, for example, you'll see as he draws the string back, the actual drawstring animates. And so for that weapon specifically, we have an anim instance, so we can actually animate the skeletal mesh. Additionally for that, we have projectile weapon data, and we have the extra weapon data. And the extra weapon data is really like the quiver of the bow, which I don't have implemented. I have to add that. So you have the quiver with the arrows in it, and then the projectile stuff would be for things like the ranged, where we want to introduce specific projectile meshes, and so we can feed that into the projectile that we're spawning. But additionally, base weapons can have multiple active, equipped, and active weapon transforms. Because for the daggers, for example, he has 2 daggers in his hands, one in the left, one in the right. And when I activate the bow, they get put into the equipped slots on the sides, and then after the bow is fired and we stay in this idle for a second, you'll then equip them back into the hand. So basically the object holds all of this data and is responsible for activating and deactivating the weapon in the hand. Additionally, I'm prototyping for the dagger for when any weapon is active. I want there to be potentially unique weapons that can have active abilities or active gameplay effects in play. So you'll notice my health with the dagger is active. He is a maximum of 3,000. And then when I switch to the bow, it drops back down to 100. So this is a simple prototype to show that when the weapon becomes active, I can activate an ability set. And when that ability set is active, of course, it has a gameplay effect. It has gameplay abilities. It could have its own attributes. So this is also responsible when the primary weapon or when the weapon itself becomes active in the hand. I can say, hey, activate this ability set or take this ability set away from the ability system component. Because down the line, I would want to have weapons that are unique, like, you know, a fire dagger, which can just apply fire damage or can stack fire, build up, or, you know, do interesting things with the special attack, or it can be ice, or pretty much status effect driven is mostly where my head goes with that kind of mechanic, just so you can have a set of daggers or even a bow that can apply fire, and you just have a fire build, and you just have a lot of cards that emphasize fire damage, fire output, and things like that for survivability. But then you can do things like ice and other elementals down the line. At least that's currently my thinking. And additionally, what the weapon is responsible for is injecting the state tree. So when we instantiate everything and we equip everything, we finally get down to, I believe it's actually in the weapon component, where we have it responsible for, linking the state tree override, which is in the weapon itself, so it's back here. So basically, we get the state tree override in our player, I believe it's in our player controller. And yeah, let me show you, let me see, the base player state tree, right? I'm running two state trees in parallel. One's for the primary weapon and one's for the secondary weapon. And by default, they are empty. And so what the weapon is meant to do is when it becomes active, we link the state tree override based off that tag. So you'll see here, state tree.gameplay.override.primary weapon, and then .secondary weapon here. We basically override that, and we get the state tree reference of which state tree we want to override. So in our daggers, we have the state tree for the dagger, so melee combo dagger. We have the state tree tag here. We also apply a gameplay tag, and this is also the active weapon ability set. And so the weapon is responsible for providing the static mesh, which is a mesh I got off of Fab. I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, so all the visuals and stuff I try to get off of Fab whenever possible. And then it also has these active weapon transform data and these equipped transform data. And so basically it iterates over the arrays to create those instances of those static meshes. And that's why we see two of them in his hand. And we could, if we wanted to, for example, go into the default one, and we could set the scale to 5 in the X in the right hand, and you'll notice the one in the right hand now is a little whiter than the other. So obviously we don't really want to have that non-uniformity there, but it's just showing you, at runtime, whenever we create these instances, we apply the transform based off this socket information, and we spawn these static meshes so that they're shown at runtime. And I also found that at least for the daggers, we don't need to have, I guess, true shapes, and we don't have to have shapes around the weapons themselves. They're really around the guy's left and right hand or his whole body. And then for the charge, sorry, not that one, for the hold, we have this very light looking sphere around him. That's what's in charge, and we have a callback to apply damage, or eventually have things like boons or either cards or just semi-persistent additives for these types of abilities, where you could have a card that activates as a passive that says, for the next 30 seconds, or for the next charged dagger ability, it triple damage or has knockback, interrupt, can consume the status effect applied, or can ground an enemy, can knock them down, can paralyze them, whatever the case might be. So those are the systems that I'm trying to build towards, and luckily I'm using the gameplay ability system, so it's pretty flexible for that. But let's get to the nitty gritty, right? So each of the weapons will have a state tree, which I just showed you that we're injecting into that parallel state tree that we see at runtime. And you can always debug these things too, but I'll show you that in a bit. But essentially what we're doing, and let me make the scale a little smaller so you can get a sense of the entire state tree. Pretty straightforward, simple kind of. So basically we have air attacks which we'll be removing, I think, because we don't have jumps or anything like that. But essentially we chill in idle, right? And then we have different entry points to these other states. We have an evade attack that requires that from idle, for example, we have a transition that says, hey, did we get the light attack state tree event? Okay, great. Do we have the matching tag query? Are we in this evasive animation? If so, we can make that transition. And it's also important to note, I have a lot of custom state tree stuff. So I have a custom input listener, which basically listens based on the input action you provide, listens for the triggered, completed, and canceled event, and then passes this tag along into state tree. So anytime my IA underscore primary weapon underscore basic attack is triggered, it sends to my state tree this input.statetree.melee.light.triggered tag. And that's why we're using these required tags for the state tree transitions. And this also works with my input buffering, so that even if you spam the attack button, it's not going to progress through the combo until certain parts of the attack itself. And I could show you a little bit of that. So with the attacks themselves, I'm using a chooser table because I'm using a shared ability. So for example, under evade attack, I have this grant dynamic ability, and it's GA underscore melee base, which takes an animation tag. So for example, melee.daggers.special.from evade. And in this ability, I take that tag and I run it through a chooser. And it's this CT melee combo chooser parent. And it checks, hey, am I doing daggers or am I doing sword? Okay, we're doing daggers. We're going to evaluate this other state tree. Evaluate this other chooser table. And then we say, okay, which one was it specifically? So if it was from evade, okay, let's go in. And this is what this attack looks like. And so we have a couple of different tracks. We have motion warping, like usual. It's best to separate out rotation from translation motion warping because you tend to want to have different behaviors and different timings for those things. And then we have our input buffer, which blocks other attacks or actions and buffers them. And then, once the buffer is released, tries to activate them. And then we have our melee trace as well. And then when we play in game, I evade, I attack, and then we get that special attack, rather than the basic combo if I were not to be evading first. I kind of like to have these types of attacks because it gives you a reason, it gives a good kind of connector from this evasive attack, and it kind of gives you a reason to have like a unique output to it. And we could have other additional layers of abilities and active or passive effects, kind of like Hades as well. They have special like dodge attacks. So we can always say, hey, your dodge attack does double damage, or hey, your dodge attack does this, or this X, Y, and Z thing. And then from there, each step of the combo is its own ability, its own copy of the ability. And these abilities have different measurements for their minimum warping distances, their default warp distances, their warp distance offset to target, the warp target names for rotation and translation, hit stop curves if we want them. So for example, for dagger, I don't think a hit stop is necessary. It makes it too sticky, if you know what I mean. And you can kind of parameterize all of this to your liking. And I can kind of show you a little bit about the motion warping. If I enable the motion warping debug, when there's no target around, we don't do any translation warping. We only do rotation warping, and we just use the built-in underlying root motion to move the character around. Let me turn off the collision shapes so you see. So there's our warp target. And if we go super slow motion, you'll see it's rotation. And we want the rotation to be pretty snappy, because at full speed, it just feels better. And I don't think that's even full speed. But when we have an enemy target, you'll notice I have both translation and rotation. And the translation will try to bring us to an offset. So you'll see this green one is our translation. So it tries to keep us to some sort of offset towards the enemy, because we never really want to be clipping or injecting or anything like that. But honestly, for the special hold, we have control over the warp target a little bit. So as I'm using the attack, I can turn the stick and you'll see the warp target adjust. But for this warp target, we are using what's built into the motion warping, where, let me make sure I have the right heavy hold. This is not the right one. Oh, it's probably built into the state tree. So you can see I'm pretty inconsistent as well with some of my logic, but that's okay. So dagger hold. We're gonna have to refactor this so that we properly do it correctly, or at least consistently. So it looks like it's a soft reference in our ability param. So here it is, skill 3, start sequence. And then we should have a looping section as well. So loop. And I think this one is what's hard reference there. So this first section is looped. So, you'll just be moving like this. So it uses that built-in root motion. But with the rotation warp, you'll see no warp translation. But here we're doing warp rotation, slurp with clamped rate. And we say the max rotation rate is 150. If we were to say, if we were to make this, for example, just normal slurp, rotation multiplier 0.1, we would have way more control over the rotation of the character as we move along. So you'll see there. But I wanted to feel kind of like the roadie run from Gears of War. So you don't have that tight control, but you have some steering within it. And I think I found a pretty decent middle ground. It's always going to be subject to play testing and stuff like that down the line. But you'll see in comparison, he's not exactly going towards the warp target, but he's guided to that position. And so we do that across each state of the state tree. And then eventually we get to our defensive action, which I just introduced today. So when you hold block, he's doing this kind of move. And that'll eventually be something like deflecting or blocking attacks. I want to make sure each defensive action has some sort of utility per weapon. I don't want it to feel super redundant or feel too much like the same thing between weapons. So that's what I'm going to be kind of aiming for. And of course, with all these actions, it gives us flexibility to how we would want cards to interject with these weapons and how we want these weapons to evolve and have unique weapons that you can chase after as part of your progressive loop. And then also down the line, we're going to be using choosers to drive locomotion animation, because right now this is not the right locomotion animation for daggers, but it's the right idle pose. And if I use the bow, he goes into the right idle pose for the bow and then unequips and equips the dagger. So once we start introducing sword and shield, and then the great sword, and then the axe or scythe, I'm just basically basing the weapons off of the available content that I have on Fab, honestly. So hopefully we'll see if that'll bite me in the ass down the line. So if this is stuff that interests you, definitely check out my YouTube channel. Consider subscribing here. You can also catch me live on YouTube. You can also catch me live on Twitch. I'll make sure to put a link in the description below, twitch.tv/JevansJerry'sGameDev. Show your support there. It's going to be much appreciated. If you have any ideas for future videos, if you want to see more content, if you have any ideas for the project, let me know. In the future, I want to put together a tutorial on motion warping, because I know there's some basic information out there, but I feel like the odd people don't really know much about how to properly construct or update transforms for the warp targets. There's also the new tech with switch off conditions that I don't think a lot of people know about, that I think would be useful information. So let me know in the comments how you feel about that. So at this point, I'm rambling, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.